Time now for this week's Health Matters. Physician assistant Lynn Szabo in the Fug House of a rainy Sunday, and Paul Critz along with you here. And we're talking something that Lynn just informed me mere seconds ago is a hot topic issue right now, and this is physician burnout.
Right.
So, what makes it a hot topic issue right now?
Well, because there's so many that are burned out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's such a huge problem now. So you made a casual comment the last time we were recorded about, let's talk about physician burnout. So I just Googled it and I got a incredible amount of information, and it's all recent. So I looked at this one particular article that was in Medscape, and it was back from January 2023, and it specifically refers to physicians, and we'll see later why that's important. But in general, burnout is long-term unresolved job-related stress leading to exhaustion, cynicism, detachment, and lack of personal accomplishment. How fun is that?
Wow, you've been reading my dossier. Oh my God, the only thing I don't have is I'm not a doctor. Okay, so sorry, that's just, wow, I hate when it's that on the nose. So I imagine there are, I'll go ahead and do your download of statistics and things. Because,
in 2018, 26% of physicians describe them as burned out. I would say there's a little bit of denial in that. I think people are in shades of burnout and things and kind of keep themselves from going to full burnout.
Yeah.
But only 26%. Okay, in 2018. And then, so what happened in 2020? COVID. And
the NBA season was canceled.
2021, all of a sudden 49% or 47% of physicians are describing themselves as burned out.
That makes sense.
And then in 2022, 53% described them as burnout. And most of the burnout was described as moderate to severe. And then, of course, most of it is in the doctors, you would kind of think, and we've seen that here in our community. The largest pool of burned out physicians work in the ER, apparently. And internal medicine, peds, which shocked me because pediatricians are almost 100% sweethearts.
That's gotta be such a burden to bear.
I would never put cynicism on a pediatrician. I would never have connected the two.
No, but that sweetheart bit has to be, I mean, such a brave face put over such a horrible situation. Maybe horrible situations. It seems like that would get to be some heavy lifting over time.
Yeah.
Wow.
It is. It's actually quite tragic sometimes. But and also more women physicians are burned out probably because of dual role. And then associated depression, super significant. But, hold the press, only 8% said they were burned out because of COVID.
What? That doesn't seem to...
Didn't see that coming, did you?
No, I did not, because it seems exactly that it's COVID that doubled the numbers, basically, of physicians self-reporting
Apparently
burnout.
It isn't. I think COVID was just the last straw on a pretty heavy burden.
Right.
So I don't think in of itself it's a significant contribution to burnout, but I think it was just like, okay,
all right,
this is now bad. Okay.
So I want to come back and revisit that and get a better understanding as to what. I guess in my oversimplified mind here, I'm thinking, doctors are just bipping along. Hey, sure, as an industry, as a profession, there's a quarter of them burned out, and then COVID happens, and then that doubles. That makes perfect sense to me.
Right.
But if that's not actually the case, I'd like to know what the case was in 2018 when there were only 26% of physicians describing themselves as burned out.
I think it was underreporting. I think that's skewed data. But that's self-reporting, okay?
Right.
So nobody ever really wants to know you're burned out or wants anybody else to know you're burned out. And
if you're a doctor, they really don't want to know that.
Yeah, and burned out up to a certain point is not something you really recognize in yourself until you're looking back. And so I think if somebody said, fill this, this form out and tell us about your burnout, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to say, no, I'm not burned out. I have righteous anger.
Right.
Yeah. So, and 20% of the burned out, this is what scared me, and 20% of burned out physicians go to alcohol or binge eating.
I'm
not so worried about the binge eating, but that that means 1 in 5 are self-medicating with alcohol. That's sad.
Why aren't you worried about the binge eating?
Because it's not going to affect what they do in the exam room, but
Yeah, good point,
alcohol
yeah.
might. And I have seen hungover physicians and ones whose behavior was worrisome, their judgment was worrisome.
Wow,
Because things made me think it was probably due to alcohol.
Oh, gosh.
So 40% self-isolate, which is what I've done in my personal burnout. I'm not a physician, so I'm not really the topic of the discussion, but it becomes so you're so frustrated with the world that you can't even listen to the radio station because it's just too much input. It becomes sensory overload. And so you just kind of go sit in a corner, which you can't really do if you're married, and you can't really do if you're a parent. And, the community thinks that you're always on and you're always available for whatever kind of hits their level of concern when you're like in the produce aisle in Safeway. So, it's really hard to isolate, but it's really common.
I'm going to have a really hard time keeping myself from making this about me, because this is really scary, the kinds of things that you're describing as far as burnout goes.
So then
I'm curious about, and I don't know if this is the place to address this, but you talked about there being physicians and a unique set of circumstances for physicians as opposed to other healthcare folks. Is now the time? Because I have that question when you were talking about it was doctors who were, physicians who were self-reporting.
That's because this particular study was targeted to physicians and not other people in medicine, many other people in medicine.
Do you have any insight into other folks like physician assistants and nurse practitioners and such?
I was going to address PAs. PAs are wildly happy.
Really?
But I didn't want to... So now you made me jump to the end, but I didn't want to be too smug.
Save that. We'll examine why PAs are in a better situation now that I know that's coming, and the listener does now. Let's go back in. Sorry, the causes.
So what are the causes? And remember, this is a study about physicians, and this is how they perceive the cause of burnout. Too much bureaucracy. Well, that's kind of insurance companies, but it can also be targeted against clinic administration and stuff. And that's where it became kind of personalized this week. And in some of the interactions at a provider meeting that I sat in on, there's also personal traits. Physicians and other medical people, but mostly physicians, self-select for personal traits of perfectionism, micromanaging, jumping to worst case scenarios constantly. We're trained to do that, and being overly empathetic.
Yeah, all the things you've spelled out here are things that I would assume would be beneficial for a healthcare worker.
And we do it with the tightest sphincter ever known. I'm not a physician, but they do it. And that jumping to worst case scenarios is super common in the medical world.
Right.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're protecting against, is the worst case scenario.
You're trained to go to worst case scenarios so that if it's something less, then you dodge the worst.
Right.
So, and being overly empathetic, so the hypothetical person that meets up with a off-call or off-duty physician in the produce department Safeway, because remember, we have to shop, right? Then you have to sit there and smile and go, you know what? My kid's waiting in the car, and I got to get this done.
So you're saying just the nature of the job lends itself to a higher burnout.
Everybody really hopes that their doctor is Marcus Welby,
and
it's just not a thing anymore. It's too bad. So remember, the physicians were asked, so what would help? And remember, this is coming from physicians. Increased compensation was number one, which I thought was...
You really?
That's not where I would have gone.
That wouldn't... if you're still working the same amount and undergoing the same psychological and physical stresses, how is more money going to help?
I don't think... that's why I think that's a stupid answer.
Yeah.
Exactly. A more manageable work schedule, which is kind of the topic of discussion oftentimes in provider meetings. More support staff, which I think is...
That can be mixed, right?
Yeah, I have lots of support staff. I don't need more support staff.
And support staff, you oftentimes end up having to support yourself.
I personally, in my pod, work with a nurse and two very experienced MAs, and sometimes three, who know my footsteps. When I walk down the hall, they respond to my footsteps. It's how trained they are. I think that's insane. But it's, yeah. So
what? What does that mean? That they know your
they're
footsteps?
super in tune.
Oh, I thought they're just, quick, get back to work. Here comes
No,
Lynn.
not at all. Not at all. They're super in tune with me. And, and they do kind of sweet but unnecessary things like open the door for me, offer me the chair, or they don't need to do any of that. But they're trying to get me to 100% focus on keeping my license in motion and serving the needs of the community. It's super sweet, but sometimes unnecessary.
You need somebody to do the James Brown thing, come in with the cape. When you're finished with an exam, come with the cape and put it over your shoulders and try to take you out of the room. And then you throw the cape off and come back in, and they come and they pull you out of there.
Yeah, there's a version of that.
What's the version of that? What's that?
It's mostly you fight over stethoscopes. That's great. But they also ask, for more respect from colleagues, which could happen here. It's kind of hard to talk to the people in the ER when they're burnt out and they're angry, and they assume that you have resources you don't have, and all they see you as the incompetent provider who's putting more work on them. And things like in tertiary care, the phrase local MD it's said with a little sneer, but they don't understand that we don't. What they can get in an hour, like I used to set up bronchoscopies for people with AIDS in an hour, okay? And there's no way you could do that here without driving a couple 100 miles and having it scheduled 6 weeks in advance and all that kind of stuff. So they say lighter patient loads would help. So what does that mean to the patient? That means it's going to take longer to get in to see your provider, and you're not going to have the time you want to spend with them to address your concerns.
Unless that comes with more providers working alongside them. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But in a place like this, trying to get more providers to work here isn't just a struggle. And then, of course, you inevitably get to discussions about unions, which I think is kind of interesting.
That is interesting. That really is interesting. So unions along because a union could address all of these things kind of en masse.
Sure.
So who's talking about unions? What level? Do doctors talk about unions?
Physicians are talking about unions. That's coming mostly from tertiary care, like educational.
Okay.
You remember in medical school, you're a medical student, then you're an intern, and then you're a resident, maybe for a couple of years, depending what you're studying, and then you're a fellow. So the hierarchy.
Okay.
So those people.
Okay.
Those people work they work like 3 days with no sleep, and which is scary. And
in a doctor, right? Yeah,
those people, but also they're kind of demanding this, but also they're the kind of people where if their boss said, chief resident or something said, you have to go home, you've reached X number of hours this week, and they would walk out the door, sit in their car for a minute, and then sneak in the back door.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So super hard to do.
The culture.
Right.
Kind of lends itself to burnout that way, or throwing yourself completely.
So the model I was taught under was disease doesn't take a day off, and neither do you.
Well, okay.
And, yeah.
Disease doesn't get burned out.
Apparently not.
Yeah.
So I think these kind of demands actually from physicians are a little tone deaf, because the patient's voice is lost in here.
Interesting. What would you add to this list?
What would I say? I would say teach providers how to recognize burnout earlier, okay, and how to ask for help. Because most of the people who are identifying themselves at burnout are moderate to severe, so they're crispy critters. So you can stick a fork in them and walk away.
Right.
So I think there has to be kind of a way to recognize burnout earlier and then address it when it's a small problem. Okay. And so what I've been hearing in provider meetings, I've been seeing a lot of micromanaging of scheduling, which I believe is a burnout, a characteristic of early burnout. And it's also builds a super distrust from the providers, and the administration are directly at odds over that. Because not just because the administration wants more patients seen for more money. That's not really it. This is where the patient's voice becomes important. The press of patients. So it's not really about whether you're getting tired and you only want to see, I don't know, X number of people today. It's about what does your community need from you, and and if you're tired now, how can you be supported? So one change I see is give us an IT, give us an electronic health records that does the job, that really does the job. So if you talk to IT people about a problem you're having with electronic medical records, they say one of two things: just do it, just make it work with no support. Or, I don't really use it, so I'm not really certain how it works. So what we need some interface between medical people and IT people, because they're really angry with each other right now.
And kind of translate the desires and needs of each group.
Right. For example, in my pod, I have a nurse who's very IT savvy, and he's also respectful. And he will say, yeah, it doesn't work like it's supposed to. We can't really change it. Let me show you a workaround.
Okay.
That's all I need. That's all I need. And then I can keep moving. So remember, this is about keeping my license in motion. Secondary. And then primary is meeting the need of the patient and the press of patients.
So is the press of having to deal with IT, of having to deal with electronic medical records, all of that, is that big of a stressor then for you?
It's a huge, enormous stressor because of what it did. So that electronic health records, it caused a paradigm and the power shift within generic medical practice. Okay. So the power went from the providers, mostly the physicians, and went to the administrators, and the IT people are kind of administrative minions.
Right.
So, and everybody recognizes that. And so right now, the most powerful people in X clinic, generic clinic, are the billers, because electronic health records are really billing tools, and it reduces the basic function of providers mostly to data entry clerks.
Right.
And they're not thrilled. They did not go to school for that. And it does not meet the patient's needs.
Wow.
Because you have to fit diagnoses into billable codes.
Right, exactly.
And that's kind of frustrating.
This has nothing to do with what you're talking about, but I was thinking about a parallel between this and teachers and what teachers have gone through in the last generation or so, and having their sort of classroom autonomy taken away as they start teaching to tests.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
And so that's why that's when the union talk kind of starts.
Okay, sure.
Okay, because providers are on the whole not very political people. I mean, some of them are super sharp. Nurse practitioners.
Sounds like, but they don't have time.
Yeah, nurse practitioners. Well, they're not trained for it either. Like that, we're not trained how to negotiate contracts or anything. We're kind of, and nurse practitioners actually have that kind of savvy.
Really,
and that's a skill they have that just outshines everybody. But
just because of what the gray area, sort of in the not the gray area, but maybe the sort of uncharted territory that they've along with physician assistants.
I think because nurses were treated so badly that they found their voice.
Oh, okay.
And they made sure that they pass it along to all their baby
Aren't
nurses.
RNs basically the same too now? I mean, from what I've heard, like RNs are like that. That's like if you get the RNs coming along, the registered nurses, then whatever you need will happen. It's like the burliest sort of group of healthcare folks out there.
Yeah, I think maybe you could say that. And some are, some are not. Some are more timid than you're implying. But yeah, they have the potential to be that. So I think if doctors could negotiate better and not just have tantrums, everybody would be happier.
Sure.
Yeah, because they don't know what to do anymore. They're so frustrated. It's like they're the fly that the kid's pulling the wings off of.
Oh, wow.
You know, they're
Yeah,
so
no, that makes
frustrated.
sense.
So it's a super hot topic right now. I'm glad to see that there's some administrative focus on it in both the clinics that I work at. And I think people are trying to get beyond adversarial and looking at the more underlying causes. Instead of being annoyed with a provider for trying to micromanage their schedule, they're recognizing that now it's a symptom of early burnout,
Right.
and they're trying to address that. But physicians can also they can help themselves too by recognizing it early in themselves. And I would say in the times that I've been burned out, the thing that helped me the most was finding something about medicine that I loved and falling in love with medicine all over again. And it's not just going to a conference, although that's one way to do that. It has to be more profound. Okay. So, for example, this radio show, I have to research a topic every week and do the best job that I can. And I get excited about the topics I pick. So, you know, Joe burned out physician could find something like that. Like, I imagine the guy who does the homeless clinic, which is not happening this Sunday.
Right.
I went down there. It's probably because of the rain. But that's food for his physician soul. Okay? But you have to keep doing it. A conference is like three days and you're done.
You also have to do that in sort of a maintenance way and do that before you are so burned out that you can't even do that.
Right.
Because that will also become a thing.
Right. And so, you know, here's another example. We have a medication review that looks at scheduled drugs like benzos and opioids, and it's supposed to be a group of physicians, although right now it's not functioning really well, so it's poorly attended. But it used to be like, hey, this worked for me once, or hey, you could try that, or, you know, and people being collaborative. Right now, they're using a model that they use for surgical residents, which is, you know, mostly like stabbing each other in the soul. And that's not at all helpful. And people are getting blamed for things they didn't do publicly in front of their peers. So
Oh, my God.
I would argue that might be one place to start, is kind of in between physicians themselves, build collaborative bridges. Yeah.
Kind of to the battle. I mean, because one thing, if you're feeling burned out, one thing you feel, I think, too, is alone in that burnout.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, what do you do? What's one of the ways that physicians respond to burnout is 40%
Isolation. Yeah, exactly.
Self-isolate.
Just make that worse.
Yeah. And you feel like super picked on and super like nobody's smart enough to get your issue, you know, and then you get snotty.
Yep.
And then that kind of, you know, that kind of spills over into how you address patients. Like, why are you so stupid that you're even bothering me with this?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is like, it shouldn't be that.
No.
Totally.
That
And then
flies in the face of the whole.
Patients have this idea that doctors are defined by surly attitudes, and they really aren't.
When we all know it's bad handwriting. So what's the? So how is it that? Because first, okay, before we move on and we get to the physician assistant in
My smug last comment.
Exactly about how well off you guys have it, I'm trying to think what's the place in the Himalayas that's like
Shangri-La.
Yeah, like you're the healthcare in Shangri-La up there. But so is the problems that kind of, it sounds like just the field of healthcare both attracts people who are prone to burnout or who are prone to putting themselves into situations that can lead to burnout, and then also the system, how it's constructed itself, how
Right. Starting from the time you're in school, the first lecture.
So how do you? Is there a way to systemically address this to make it better that could actually be
it has
utilized?
to start from the first lecture, because remember, people get into med school and they're super happy to be there. they've done, all these hardcore science classes. They've reached for the best grades. They've intensely studied everything, and they are bright, new shiny pennies.
Right.
And then what happens is they have that kind of like desire to serve the community kind of slowly ground out of them in a really awful way. And so by the time their intern year, remember the intern year is where the rubber hits the road. Actually, it's like being ground down by a glacier. And by the end of the intern year, their milk of human kindness is all dried up.
Right.
And then they get into the resident year, and they're burnt out, and they're cynical, and they're dumping. There's a lot of work shifting and stuff going on. There's like reasons why I couldn't possibly do this that are like the stupidest reason.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that a lot of that perceived arrogance of a doctor, which is a thing, and I'm just thinking about the television doctors that I've seen, right, where you've got that doctor who's sort of, he's over and above. He's just his stuff is better than everybody else. Could that guy just be burned out?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's a whole tragic side to that whole
I'm
dynamic.
trying to think if I even know a physician in town who's regularly in the clinics who's like that. The answer would be no.
Who's like what?
Who's like cynical and mean and like who they are as a person. Like when you're just talking, about how their kids are or something. They're quite charming, and they're really talented, intelligent people. Oftentimes they're musically accomplished in some way. Oftentimes they're surfers. I don't know why.
That is the thing, right?
Yeah. And they hike and they kayak and they...
There's a doctor here locally who rode his bike from Brookings like every day or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, they do stuff like that. That's not that uncommon. One of them, actually, there were two physicians in Eureka riding their bikes along 101 between Arcata, that corridor between Arcata.
Yeah.
And one of the physicians in the lead had a heart attack, and the other physician behind him jumped off and started CPR.
Oh my God.
And unfortunately he didn't make it, but I don't know that my colleagues would necessarily do that for me. But what I'm saying is if you know them personally, they are way better people than you would think. They're just in an awful position. And so I don't know. I would say if patients want more humanity in medicine, then we need to start looking at how to put it in there.
Right.
Because it's an important thing.
Are there any systems in place now, even parallel systems? Like you work a lot in UIHS and United Indian Health Services. So is that like, what's the burnout? Is there a difference in burnout situation there? Is it just the same across the board in all healthcare, or are there models in place now that allow you to sort of work with the burnout or address the burnout?
I think that's being addressed now. I don't think it really is a thing.
But
they do come in. I will say, I think in UHS, I think it's well run up here in Del Norte, and I think the administrator is really trying to make burnout, especially in time of COVID, a thing that is administratively addressed. So, sometimes they hire a massage therapist to come in, and that sounds awfully like crazy, but people are that tense.
You're having a bad day. That could be a really good thing.
When the power went out, they were on generator, and they made us a warm dinner every night.
Oh, wow.
The administrators did.
Wow. Okay, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I know.
Well, even just having that sort of esprit de corps has got to be something that helps. So, all right. How is it better for you as a physician assistant?
73% of physicians assistants, and I think it was 2020, had self-reported. They had no signs of burnout. So I would say sometimes it's not recognized, but I would agree with that. I think most PAs are just kind of happy to be invited to the party.
Why?
And why?
Yeah. What makes it better being a PA?
I think you can be more generalized, so that if we had a local PA who's at the community clinic level, and when that became not enough to feed a soul, he switched to dermatology. And dermatologic providers actually are some of the happiest.
Are they really?
And they see 100 people a day on the average. So
yeah, but their happiness is only skin deep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But
so it's just you're not as locked in to where you are.
We're not as locked in. We're kind of like way more versatile, and I think that's good. I also think it's kind of nice to have the PA model as envisioned by Dr. Stead was like the buck never stops with us. And so when it gets super crazy and we don't know what to do, we are in a collegial relationship with with a physician, and we can go ahead and have them take care of the problem with their greater expertise. And then if it's appropriate to teach us how to do that, then we've got that lifelong learning thing going on too. I think also PAs are, and I just said this, not really political animals. We just want to see patients. So if you're not, although it's good to have a political voice, sometimes it's good not to.
Yeah,
and
right.
just ignore it all, because a lot of things blow over in like a week or two.
Yeah. Let it go. Let it make its noise.
Yeah. And I think an urgent care PA, this is from my personal perspective, I'm used to a lot of people waiting for me. I can click in to the moment, like what I need to do right now, and I don't have to burn my energy waiting that the waiting room is full.
Right.
Worrying about that.
Okay, yeah.
So I can be super singularly focused, I guess. And I think that's good to save your soul too.
Yeah.
Because then you don't have to burn up energy, number one, being mad that everybody's waiting for you, or number two, that just demonstrates the need of the patient population. It's not like you're not getting the A+ on the paper because you got a full waiting room. That's a good thing, kind of.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that you can just, how to explain this? You can't micromanage your practice. You can't say, today I'm not going to do vaginal complaints or something. You just have to be ready to roll with a wide variety of stuff. So that's how I avoid getting burnt out, even though I work more than 40 hours a week.
Right. Wow.
I know, because it's all super fun, especially the Saturday clinic at Open Door. Oh my God. We kind of walk up and down the hallways shrieking, "No rules, no rules." super liberating. Yeah.
Yeah, you've spoken a lot about that, actually, how fun it is to see the open wound walk through the door for you.
Right.
I know.
Yeah, and we kind of swagger. Yeah, I saw 37 in 4 hours, and then administrators, of course, are kind of like, "Yeah, really? Why can't everybody do that?" Because it's acute care, it's a different animal.
Right.
So.
Well, Lynn, thank you very much. Is there anything else about burnout you want to make sure gets in?
No, but I want to talk that the CEO of United Indian Health in Humboldt and Del Norte counties, and I said her name wrong last time, so I want to correct it. Her name is Liz Lara. I said Land. It was Lara.
Oh, okay.
So Liz Lara is super excited to be on the phone with us and talk about what UHS is. And I think in this community, it's not really well known.
It isn't. It isn't well known. And from what I know of it, what you've shared with me, it does a whole heck of a lot of good in this community,
I think it does. And also, maybe we'll get a little refresher course. Like a lot of people surprisingly can't name the tribes that are up here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'm sure she'll address all of this.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So that's next week's Health Matters. I'm looking forward to that already. Lynn, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. We'll see you next week.